There's a version of South Carolina that nobody puts on Instagram. No beaches, no plantation tours, no rooftop bars downtown, just pine flats, red dirt roads, and land so cheap it feels like a clerical error. We found 12 towns scattered across rural South Carolina where people are building off-grid lives for next to nothing. A state income tax that lawmakers just cut for the first time in decades, no homeowners associations out here, and property taxes under $500 a year in more than one of these towns. And zoning relaxed enough in the right county that you can park a tiny home, raise chickens, and legally harvest rainwater without a single bureaucrat breathing down your neck. We've got a business district that ran its own bank a full century before anyone was talking about generational wealth. A natural spring that was legally deeded straight to God so it can never be sold, developed, or taxed by anyone. A backyard garden so famous it draws visitors from 3 states over. Built by a man who wasn't even allowed into the town's own garden contest. And a 200-foot fake sombrero that somehow became one of the most photographed landmarks in the entire state. If this video helps you find your escape hatch, the least you can do is hit subscribe. We don't charge rent. These aren't the towns that show up in relocation guides or glossy retirement magazines. Most of them sit in the Petey region or the old cotton belt of the Midlands, places that boomed 100 years ago and never got the memo that the boom ended, which is exactly why the land is still priced the way it is. Before we start, a quick reality check because I'd rather you know this up front than get burned later. South Carolina's state income tax just got restructured this year, and income under $30,000 is now taxed at just 1.99%, with automatic cuts built in for future years. Social Security isn't taxed at all, and once you turn 65, you get an extra $15,000 deduction on top of that. Property taxes statewide average around 0.5% of a home's value, which is one of the lowest rates in the country, and homeowners 65 and older get the first $50,000 of their home's value exempted entirely. Rainwater harvesting is legal everywhere in this state. Composting toilets are murkier. South Carolina doesn't have a blanket state law like some off-grid friendly states, so most counties will only approve one as a backup system alongside an actual permitted septic tank, not as your only bathroom. And you will need that septic permit. A permanent home not hooked to a municipal sewer line needs a permitted system, and depending on your soil and water table, that typically runs $5,000 to $15,000, averaging around $8,500 with a conventional gravity system on the cheaper end in the sandy soils of the Sandhills and Midlands regions. On solar, South Carolina doesn't have a dedicated state law protecting your right to install panels the way a few other states do, which means a homeowners association technically could restrict it, but almost none of these towns have homeowners associations governing the kind of rural acreage we're talking about, so in practice, it's rarely an issue out here. None of this is truly free. Between land, a well or water hookup, a septic permit, and basic power, you're still looking at real upfront costs before you ever move a single box in. But compared to almost anywhere else in the country, cheap, real, and legal is still very much on the table here. Let's count it down. Number 12, Latta. The first time I drove through, I almost missed the town center entirely. A couple of blocks of brick storefronts, and then farmland again, like the town just gives up and goes back to being fields. This little railroad town in Dillon County has about 1,200 people, and it was founded in 1888 by a railroad company that deliberately named it after an outside surveyor instead of a local family, just to avoid playing favorites. McLeod Health Dillon is about 7 miles up the road, roughly an 8-minute drive, so you're not stranded out here. Residential lots around Latta commonly list under $20,000, and the town still runs one of only 5 surviving Carnegie libraries left in South Carolina, a limestone building that opened its doors in 1914 and never stopped, still lending books more than a century later on a budget most towns this size can't dream of. What gets me about Latta is how unbothered it is. Nobody's trying to sell you a lifestyle here. It's just a small, quiet, genuinely cheap place to plant a homestead, put in a garden, and not hear a neighbor's television through the wall. The honest catch is that it's small and remote in the way rural Petey towns tend to be. Population has been slipping for years, and services thin out fast once you're outside the town limits, so you'll want a reliable truck and a full pantry. What LATA gives you in exchange is a lot of quiet acreage within a short drive of an actual hospital, which is more than a lot of towns twice its size can say. Number 11, Winnsboro. I want to be straight with you on this one because it's the priciest entry on this list, and it earns its spot by being an honest contrast rather than a bargain. Fairfield County's seat sits about 30 miles north of Columbia, with a little over 3,000 residents, and the pull from the capital city has pushed land prices here noticeably higher than everywhere else we're covering, with rural acreage often running into 5 figures per acre and a median home value pushing $56,000 even with a modest property tax rate under 1%. The Winnsboro Town Clock, built in 1837, is billed as the oldest continuously running clock in the entire country, still keeping time on the same courthouse tower it started on, and the old cotton mill here was famous enough to inspire Winnsboro Cotton Mill Blues, a protest song later performed by Leadbelly and Pete Seeger. The trade-off is real though. Fairfield Memorial Hospital, a 63-year fixture in town, closed for good in December of 2018 and was replaced same day by an emergency room-only facility a couple miles away. So anything beyond stabilizing care means a drive to Columbia. You're getting Columbia-adjacent convenience and a piece of genuine American history, but you're paying more for the land and losing full inpatient care locally. Include it if proximity to a real city matters more to you than rock-bottom prices, because 30 minutes to Columbia is a genuinely different lifestyle than the 2-hour drives you'll see later on this list. Number 10, Walterboro. This one calls itself the front porch of the Lowcountry, and once you're sitting on Washington Street watching the moss sway, you get why. About 5,500 people live in this Colleton County seat, roughly halfway between Charleston and Savannah, and Colleton Medical Center is right there in town, so you're covered on hospital access without having to drive to either city. Land is genuinely two-tiered here. Small in-town residential lots run $20,000 to $50,000 an acre, but the larger rural and timber tracts outside town drop to somewhere between $11,000 and $22,000 an acre, with a county property tax bill that averages under $500 a year. The town's old standpipe water tower is one of only 3 surviving structures of its kind left in South Carolina, and back in the 1800s, the base of it doubled as the town jail, so the water tower and the drunk tank were, structurally speaking, the same building. Colleton County's poverty rate runs above the state average, and some of the outlying land sits close enough to wetlands that a flood zone check before you buy isn't optional. Still, a low-country porch town with a real hospital, a walkable historic downtown, and land under $12,000 an acre is a rare combination, and it's one of the few entries on this list where you genuinely don't have to choose between charm and practicality. Number 9, Manning. Drive in from the east and Lake Marion just appears between the pines, glassy and enormous, and it's easy to forget you're still in a county seat of under 4,000 people. Clarendon County's seat sits right on the edge of that lake, and it still manages to host McLeod Health Clarendon within the town itself, which matters a lot when you're this far from a bigger city. Small residential lots run $46,000 to $66,000 for just over an acre, while larger recreational tracts near the lake can run $200,000 or more, so your price depends heavily on whether you want lake access or just land back from the water, and it's worth walking both options before you commit to one. The county's median home value sits around $89,000, with an average property tax bill under $500 a year. Every summer, Manning turns into the unofficial capital of Santee Cooper Country striped bass fishing, with a festival built entirely around the lake's reputation for producing trophy fish that draw anglers from 3 states over. The honest caveat is that recent home sale numbers here have swung wildly month to month, a sign of a thin, small-town market, so treat any single listing price as a snapshot rather than gospel, and expect rural low-country poverty rates that run above the state average. If you're the type who'd rather spend your evenings on a boat than on a porch, this is probably your top pick on the whole list. Number 8, Kingstree. This is one of my favorite origin stories on the entire list, and I think about it every time I see a pine tree now. Back when South Carolina was still a British colony, the crown marked a single towering white pine here with a broad arrow symbol, reserving it exclusively for Royal Navy shipmasts, and cutting it down was a punishable offense. That tree gave the town its name. Today, Kingstree is home to about 3,200 people in Williamsburg County, and county-wide land averages around $5,500 an acre, with larger tracts sometimes coming in even cheaper per acre, and market sales on existing homes ranging anywhere from around $115,000 to $240,000 depending on condition. The Thorntree House, built in 1749, is considered the oldest home in the entire South Carolina Lowcountry, and it was physically relocated into town in 1969 rather than let it fall apart out in the country. Revolutionary War hero Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, even fought British troops nearby at the Battle of Lower Bridge in 1781. Here's the real caveat though. Kingstree lost its own standalone hospital, and care was consolidated into MUSC Health's Black River Medical Center about 10 to 12 miles away in Cades. That's a genuine trade-off for anyone thinking long-term about aging in place out here, and it deserves real consideration, not a footnote. Weigh the history and the land prices against that drive time honestly before you commit to anything. If you're finding some of these numbers as surprising as I did digging through the county records, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I cover towns like this every single week, and the next 6 entries get even more interesting than what you've seen so far, including the one town on this list where a piece of land was legally handed over to God himself. Number 7, Bishopville. Lee County seat has fewer than 3,000 people, and there's no hospital directly in town, so you're looking at roughly a 20-mile drive to Prisma Health Tuomi Hospital in Sumter. Rural land around Bishopville commonly runs $3,000 to $11,000 an acre, and the county's average property tax bill sits under $500 a year on a median home value around $61,000. But the reason Bishopville shows up on lists like this one has nothing to do with cost of living. A self-taught artist named Pearl Fryer was once denied entry into the town's own Garden of the Month contest, and in response, he taught himself topiary and spent decades sculpting his own yard into rows of spirals and swirls, a nationally celebrated art installation that's since been featured in Garden & Gun magazine Atlas Obscura and a full-length documentary. People drive hours just to see it, and it's still free to walk through. No admission fee, no gift shop pushing you toward a $15 magnet on the way out. The honest downside is the same one you'll hear a few more times on this list. No local hospital, a shrinking population, and one of the lower median household incomes in the state. But a garden that famous, sitting in a town this small, tells you these places aren't as forgotten as they look from the highway. Number 6, Cheraw. Locals call it the prettiest town in Dixie, and it earns that nickname with genuinely well-preserved historic architecture, block after block of it, right along the PD River. About 5,000 people live here in Chesterfield County, McLeod. Health Cheraw is located directly in town, and the county's effective property tax rate sits around 0.5%, among the lowest in South Carolina, with a median home list price around $224,000 for in-town properties. Rural tracts outside town run in the neighborhood of $4,600 an acre, considerably cheaper once you're past the historic district. Here's the fact that always gets people. In May of 1776, weeks before the actual Declaration of Independence was signed, Cheraw's own grand jury declared independence from Great Britain on its own on paper before anyone in Philadelphia made it official. Before the Civil War, this small town held the largest bank in South Carolina outside of Charleston, and it's the birthplace of jazz legend Dizzy Gillespie, whose statue now sits in the town square with his signature bent trumpet cast right into the bronze. The trade-off is a small-town economy that's still working through the long, slow transition away from the cotton and banking wealth that built it in the first place, so you're buying into real history alongside real economic headwinds. Number 5, Marion. This one's got a story before you even get to the numbers. The town was named in 1847 for Revolutionary War General Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, and according to local history, it was spared during Sherman's march because the PD River happened to be flooded when Union troops came through, forcing them around the town entirely. About 6,500 people live in Marion today, and Carolina's Hospital Marion sits right in town, so you're covered for anything but the most specialized care. Rural tracts in the 20 to 80 acre range commonly run between $6,600 and $8,500 an acre, and this county consistently posts some of the lowest annual property tax bills anywhere in the state, often landing in the low hundreds of dollars a year on modest homesteads. I'll be straight with you that the real estate data out of Marion is thinner and more inconsistent than some of the bigger towns on this list, so treat exact price claims here as directional rather than locked in, and always verify current listings yourself before you get attached to a number. What's consistent, though, is that Marion keeps showing up in county-by-county tax comparisons as one of the cheapest places in the entire state to own a home outright. Number 4, Dillon. You've probably seen this town's real landmark without even realizing it if you've ever driven I-95 through the Carolinas and wondered why there's a 200-foot sombrero on the horizon. Alan Schaefer built south of the border here back in 1949, a roadside empire complete with that sombrero tower and a 104-foot neon Pedro sign advertised across nearly 200 billboards for miles in every direction. A full-blown roadside attraction economy built on nothing but curiosity. Underneath the kitsch, Dillon is a real town of about 6,200 people with McLeod Health Dillon located directly in town. So hospital access isn't a concern. Larger rural tracts here run $2,700 to $3,500 an acre, some of the cheapest raw land on this entire list, though smaller in-town lots and homes list considerably higher, with market values on existing houses running well over $100,000. The honest caveat is that Dillon has been economically distressed for years. Population has been declining, and home values have softened recently rather than climbed. If you want cheap acreage and don't mind a slower local economy, it's hard to beat on price alone, and you get a genuinely bizarre roadside neighbor as a permanent conversation starter. Number 3, Barnwell. This one's a genuine double feature. Barnwell is the birthplace of James Brown, and it's also home to what's billed as the last freestanding sundial in the United States, a claim the town celebrates every year with its own Sundial Festival, complete with a parade around the actual monument downtown. About 4,600 people live here. County-wide land runs around $6,500 an acre, with specific tracts like 52 acres listed around $215,000, and the median property tax bill sits around $600 a year on a median home value under $40,000. Now here's the caveat, and it's a significant one. Barnwell's full-service hospital, Southern Palmetto, closed permanently in 2016 after years of financial losses. It was eventually replaced by an emergency-level medical center in 2019, but that's not the same thing as a hospital with inpatient beds. And if you're planning to age in place out here, that gap in care matters. Cheap land and a genuinely fascinating hometown story balanced against a real healthcare access problem that anyone over 60 should weigh seriously before signing anything. If you've made it this far, do me a favor and drop a like on this video. It genuinely helps more people find it, and honestly, it's easier than reading a county tax assessor's website, which is most of what I did to make this one. We've got 2 towns left, and they might be the 2 best deals on the entire list. Number 2, Blackville. Technically, this is a Barnwell County town of under 2,000 people, sharing the same emergency medical center as Barnwell itself, with the nearest full hospitals in Aiken or Orangeburg roughly half an hour away. But Blackville's real claim to fame sits just outside town. Healing Springs, a set of natural mineral springs that locals have believed in for generations, formally deeded to God in a 1944 land grant, specifically so the property could never be sold, developed, or taxed by anyone, meaning it has sat completely untouched for more than 80 years. People still drive from out of state, jugs in the trunk, to fill up with the water for free. Land around the area runs comparable to the rest of Barnwell County. In the mid-single digits of thousands per acre for raw, unplanted acreage, though listings with established timber, like a nearby 92-acre planted pine tract running over $400,000, can run considerably higher. It's a shrinking, quiet town with a limited job base, but if you want proof that some things in this state genuinely can't be bought, this is it. Bring your own jugs, and maybe don't ask the county assessor what they think of that 1944 deed. Number 1, Bennettsville. Out of everywhere on this list, Marlborough County seat is the one that made me stop and recheck the numbers twice. The median property tax bill here runs around $323 a year on a median home value in the mid-$30,000 range, which might be the lowest combination on this entire list. And it holds up whether you're looking at a small in-town house or a rural homestead lot on the edge of the county. Raw land around town runs anywhere from about $2,900 to $21,000 an acre depending on size and location, and most of it lands well under $8,500. McLeod Health Cheraw is about 16 miles away, call it 20 to 25 minutes, and there's a McLeod-affiliated clinic right in Bennettsville itself for anything that doesn't need a full hospital. So day-to-day care is genuinely close even if the nearest full emergency room technically isn't in town. But the number that actually stopped me was this. Between 1876 and 1976, Bennettsville was home to a thriving Black-owned business district called the Gulf, named for the Gulf oil station that anchored it. And in 1919, it became home to South Carolina's first Black-owned bank to actually issue loans and take deposits. That's not a footnote. That's a century of real economic history sitting quietly in a town most people drive past without a second look. Remember that septic number from the top of this video, the $5,000 to $15,000 for a permitted system, averaging around $8,500? On land this cheap, with rainwater harvesting legal statewide and a homestead exemption waiting for you at $65, the math here genuinely works in a way it just doesn't in most of this country. The honest caveat is that the population has been slipping by about 1% a year, and median household income sits around $34,000. So this isn't manufactured quaintness, it's a place still working to rebuild. And anyone moving in should go in eyes open, not just chasing a low number on a spreadsheet. That said, if you're looking for the single town on this list where your money genuinely stretches the furthest, this is the one I keep coming back to. That's the list. 12. South Carolina towns, from a railroad stop with a Carnegie Library to a business district that ran its own bank a century before anyone was talking about generational wealth, where a permitted septic system and a legal rain barrel will get you further than a mortgage broker in Charleston ever will. None of these places are on a brochure, and none of them are pretending to be something they're not. Some of them are struggling, some of them are quietly thriving, and almost all of them have been overlooked for so long that land is still priced like it's 1995. What they have in common is land you can actually afford, property tax bills that won't eat your Social Security check, and in almost every case, a piece of real history that most of the state has forgotten about. This isn't a promise that any of it is free. You'll still need a permit, a septic system, and a plan for the nearest hospital. But cheap, legal, and real is still very much on the table if you know where to look, and now you do. Do your own homework with the county assessor and the health department before you buy anything, because tax rates and septic rules shift, and the last thing you want is to fall in love with a number that's already out of date. Talk to the neighbors before you talk to a realtor. Walk the land in both the dry season and after a hard rain, and treat every listing price as a starting point for your own research, not a guarantee. If this video helped you rethink what off-grid living in the Carolinas could actually look like, subscribe to the channel because I put out videos like this every single week covering the cheapest, strangest, and most overlooked places to live in this country. Drop a comment and tell me which one of these 12 you'd actually move to. I'll see you in the next one.